we are going to cover dsum, dcount, and some nested if functions. Now, does anybody have any questions about anything that we've done so far? Any of yesterday's stuff? No? Okay, good. In that case, I shall jolly well crack on with this. So hopefully you can see Excel on your screen. Yeah,
Yep.
Should be there somewhere, I think. Here we have an example of the dsum function. And by an example, I mean a really bad example that Microsoft use as a sample of what it does. The idea of dsum is that you can sum up the total of a bunch of figures, just like the sum function. Can you hear me now, Paul?
Yeah.
Excellent, good. Okay, just in time because we just started. So just explaining the dsum function. The idea of it is that you can add up a load of numbers that meet a criteria. And so, like I say, this is the Microsoft sample, which I don't think is a brilliant example. It's basically got a list of trees and their height, their age, their yield, and the profit that's made on or from them or something. Because, you know, this is a real down-to-earth sample where people always know about the yield and profit of a tree. Anyway, so there's the database, and then below it, there's a criteria where we have tree type, the height of the tree, it has to be greater than 10, the age has to be less than 1, and the height has to be greater than 16. That's not right. Anyway, here's the dsum function, and if I double click on it, well, if I click on it, and then double click on it, you can see how it's interrogating this data set with this criteria, and it's giving me a total. And basically, that's how it works, but it's really not interesting because it means nothing to anybody. So what I'm going to do now instead is open a spreadsheet which contains invoices, and that way then, hopefully that'll mean stuff. Here we go. This is the one that we've been using lots of. So here's a bunch of invoices. Even if you're not in accounts, you're pretty much guaranteed to know what an invoice is. And what I want to do is I want to add up all the ones that are over 30 days old to know how much money is outstanding. That's greater. How many invoices are outstanding that are greater than 30 days, the value of them. Obviously, there's loads of different ways of achieving that. I could filter this. I could do a pivot table or something, or I could do something really complex. But dsum is a great, simple way of doing it. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to call it old invoices. And then here, the criteria that I'm going to put in is going to be, well, first of all, I want the value. I want the value of the invoice, and I want the value there, well, the total value of all the invoices. And then the criteria will be the date. Now, these ones are all within 60 days. So I want all the ones that are older than 30 days. Okay, that's a reasonable thing. So if I say, what's today? Today 29. Well, if I say anything that's older than the first of this month, that would be an easy thing. And so remembering how dates work, they're just big numbers. And so if I want something that's older than the first of this month, then I'll just say less than. So if I put in less than, and then say first of the 4th of 2020, there we go. So there's my criteria. I want any invoice that is older than the first of this month, and I want all of those invoices added together to give me the total that's in the value. So the date field is that one, so we have to put in the date field so it knows that's what I'm talking about. The value field is the one that we're going to add up, and then here I'm going to stick in a dsum function. And dsum works like this, and for this I'm going to use my little whiteboard down the bottom here, homemade whiteboard, where I'm going to change it to have a nice big font, not that big, about that big, and then I'm going to use Merge and Center to make it readable. I'm going to do it the other way around so it doesn't screw up my spreadsheet design, which I've now already screwed up. Let me just adjust my row height. If I double click, it'll auto set it. Right, good. So ignore all that bit. Here's my little whiteboard, merge and center, and then make the text big. 18 should do it. Right, this is how a dsum works. Starts with equals because it's a calculation, followed immediately by dsum and an open bracket. The first bit is the database range. So it uses better wording than that, but I'm just going to call it database because I can't remember what it's actually called. Should have prepared better, really. Then, actually, I'm going to do it like this. Hang on. I'm going to use the real Microsoft wording. So the first thing is just database. Then we have a comma, and then we have the field. Now, by field, it means the one that you want to add up. Now, here, there's only one value column anyway. But if it was, I don't know, individual product lines, then we might want to add up different, you might have different columns with different numbers in. Anyway, so field. And then we've got criteria. And then we close the brackets. And then what I have to do, if it lets me, is go back to the beginning and put that in there. Right. So, I've lost my date field. Less than the 1st of the 4th, 2020. Return. Okay, so there's the function dsum database, and by database it means this chunk of invoices here. Field, and by field it means which field do you want to report on, and in this case I want the value field. And then criteria, and by criteria it means, well, what are we going to select by? Well, I'm going to select by date. Let's put it in that cell. That looks a lot tidier. So if I go equals dsum, open bracket, I can type in the database. I can say A1 to H18 or F18, or I can just click and drag. That'd be easier. So that's selected the database. Then when I do comma, it moves on to the next bit. And with the little function helper, you can see which bit we're on because it shows it in bold. And it's like, well, what field do you want added up? Do you want the sum function applied to? The value field. So I'm going to select that word value there, just because I've got the word value there. Saves me typing it in. Then comma, then criteria. And then the criteria is that date. But so that it knows it's the date that I'm looking for, I need to select the heading as well. Date. So if I click and drag, select those two, I've now said, here's a database, that's the thing that I want added up, and this is the ones that I want. And if I close the brackets, hit return, ta-da, that's the total of invoices.
When you hit the, you put the value in, how come you can click on that value there and you don't have to sort of highlight all the value column? You don't, is that
it just looks for the name. So if I put in there analysis,
right,
it would add up the analysis column instead. Which
I see. Yeah, okay.
Just getting the word. And so it's as easy as that, really. I know it sounds a bit gobbledygook if you're not used to using this kind of thing, but it's a really useful function. Because now I can go to here and say, well, what about invoices that are 2 weeks old? So let's say the 14th. And now you can see it's a higher value. We can also put in more criteria. We could say, like, well, let's go back to that one where we've got things that are before this month. We say, well, it's quite a high value outstanding. How about if we pinpoint which particular rep people are buying stuff from? So I could put rep in there, and I can just put in the rep initials. And now if I adjust this function, we're looking at the same database. We've got the same criteria again, or same field I mean, because we want to know the value. But I want to adjust the criteria. So if I just drag that range over there, or if I manually typed it in to be K5 to L6, it's now saying anything that's before the 1st of the month and is sold by this rep. Then if I hit return, I can compare the values and go, well, actually, that rep, most of their stuff must be paid off because it's quite a low figure. Whereas if I put another one in, yeah, they got a load of money outstanding. So you could use it to analyse where bad debts are coming from, if it's a certain rep or a certain product or that kind of stuff. So it's a nice little analysis tool. In addition to dsum, we have a very similar function that goes by the name of dcount. Starts with equals because it's a function, followed immediately by the name and then immediately by an open bracket. And then here we have just two fields. Again, if I had just actually typed this in first, I could have used the exact wording. Just going to move this down. Right. I want to know the number of invoices, so I'm just going to put invoice there. And then I'm going to use dcount. And it's database field criteria again. I use exactly the same wording. Right, good. Yeah, I'm glad I prepared with this. Database field. Good job no one's watching. Oops. Criteria. Okay, so it works in exactly the same way in that you tell it where the database is, what field you want to count, and I'll come back to that in a second, and what the criteria is, like this little selection bit down here. But rather than applying the sum function, it applies the count function. Now, the criteria, well, the answers to these questions are pretty straightforward and simple. The field, though, you think, well, which field would I use? Well, you could count any field you like, any of those fields, because in this case they're all populated. But if I was counting up to see how many invoices there were, then the obvious field to choose is the invoice number, because every invoice has got a number. Even if the analysis code is missing or the value is wrong or something, at least you know an invoice is always going to have an invoice number. So this is how dcount works. So if I go equals dcount, the database, I'm going to click and drag to select it again, like so, comma. The field, I'm going to use that name there, invoice, so it adds up how many invoices there are, or totals up. And the criteria, again, I'm going to use the same little criteria box down here, where I could just use one of these or both of them. I'm going to use both. And I'm going to close the brackets and hit return. And I can see there's 6 invoices of that criteria. And if I change that rep, if I delete that rep, it now includes all the reps. And if I delete that date, it includes all the dates. And I could, of course, put a different rep in there and analyze in that manner. You have seconds of fun with this. I could even change it so that that's a drop-down box using data validation, which of course we all know about because we did it the other day. So if I were to go to data and then data validation and then select a list in here, I could select a list from somewhere, or I can just type it in. I'm just going to type it in. What have I got? A, B, N, B, L, P. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. A, B, comma, N, B, comma, L, P. I can't remember whether it's a comma or whether it's a semicolon. It's a semicolon in Access. I'm sure in Excel it's a comma. There we go. So now I've got a nice little drop-down box where I could say, right, well, let's see how many invoices this rep has done, how many invoices this rep has done. So you can have a wild time with this kind of analysis. And again, in there, I could put a date, or I could not. If I say things happen before the 30th of the 3rd of this month. There's 3 invoices to this rep, and there's 2 to this one. And there you go. That's dsum and dcount. Anyone got any questions about that?
Yeah. So can you with the criteria, can you go sort of less than up to no more than, or can you just put in one criteria?
Yeah.
Can you put in more?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah.
So what I do, if I get rid of this cell here, I'm just going to actually delete this so it moves everything up, fill the gap, because I need more cells. So if I wanted to say I wanted invoices that were between the 15th and the 30th, I would say less than the 30th and greater than the 15th of the 3rd, 2020. And so now, I'm not going to put because there won't be enough invoices otherwise. So now it's looking for things that are less than the 30th. But if I adjust this, well, I'm just going to do that one first of all so you can see the effect. If I adjust the range so it includes both of those, when I hit return,
Oh,
it's 17. What did it say before? 10. So that can't be right. So what we have to do instead, I think it might have to go in a separate column. I know what it did. Yeah. I'll explain this in a second. Let me just make it work properly. Right, there we go. So there's 7 invoices that are less than that, but greater than that. And if I change that to greater than 20, it'll go from 7 down to like 5 or something. Yeah, there we go. Now, yeah, you can put a criteria in. You can put in a strict range of greater than and less than. But the way it works is if you put it in a list, it's basically saying and. No, it's saying or if you put it in a list. So it's saying less than the 30th, and that includes everything that's before the 30th. And then the one below I said greater than or after the 15th is saying all of the ones that are after the 15th. And so you end up with more invoices. So if you have it in a list, you're basically saying this criteria or this criteria or this criteria. So you end up with loads of different answers. If you do it going across, and so I've got date and date, it's saying and. So it's saying it has to be less than this and it has to be more than this.
right. Yeah.
And so if I wanted 2 reps and I put 2 reps there, it would give me any of the, that's a bad example. I'm going to stop talking about that now. But yeah, so if I wanted to analyse between a range, then you would do it across like that. So, and if I wanted it by rep as well, I could do that. I mean, you can do all this sort of thing just by having a filter on the data and then having a subtotal at the bottom. And the subtotal function is really easy to use. You just say equals subtotal open bracket 9, comma, and then the range of cells, and then close the bracket. But this is just a cute little thing if you want to answer a quick question, or if you wanted to look at data that's on a different page or in a different document. And so with this, I can put all kinds of complex criteria in and get exactly the answers that I'm looking for. So, do you have any other questions relating to this? Or anything else? No? Okay, good. That was easy. Right, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do some nested ifs, because everyone loves a good nested if statement. But before I do that, I'm going to click on this, select that, and press this button. Right, done it. Okay, so what have I got in here? Oh gosh, that was a wild day. Oh, this is a good one. Oh yes, the old stamp duty. Everyone loves a bit of stamp duty. By everyone, I mean anyone that's collecting the money. Let's get rid of those. Okay, so does everyone remember how the if function works?
No. No.
Good. And that will justify the whole explanation. A little while ago, I think we very briefly touched on it. We did the if function. And the if function is one of the most useful things, or one of the most flexible things that you can have working in Excel. In that, what it does is it basically asks a question in the form of a statement, which is a little bit confusing. And then that statement that it makes is either true or false. So it will basically look at a 7 and say, that's greater than 100. And you go, no, it isn't. So it says false. Or if it is greater than 100, it will say true. And you think, well, that's not particularly exciting. But in essence, it isn't very exciting. But what you can do with that is, rather than seeing the word true or false appear on the screen, you can make anything you like appear. So you can say, if it's greater than this figure, then they get this percentage commission, or they get this much bonus, or they get these words of congratulations. And you can say, if it isn't greater than this figure, then they can get this much of a fine, or this percentage, lower rate commission, or this details of how to collect the P45. It can be whatever you like, and the things don't have to be linked anywhere. It's completely flexible. So an if statement is really useful in its own right. So you can have it look at a bunch of exam results, and if the pass mark is 67, then you've got names all the way down the page, the results all the way down the page, and then you can have an if statement next to each one of them going all the way down the page, saying whether it's a pass or a fail. So it would say, this is greater than 67, then put the word pass, otherwise put the word fail. You can have it in a delivery charge box on the bottom of an invoice, and you can say, if the invoice is over £50, it's free delivery, otherwise it's £5. And the if statement will say, this invoice is greater than £50. And if that's true, put 0, otherwise put 5. And it's that sort of thing. So you can do all sorts of stuff with an if function. Where it gets really fun is where you put an if function inside an if function. So then you can ask multiple levels of questions. So here, we're looking at stamp duty. But what I'll do is I'll show you how an if function works first of all. Starts with an equal sign, followed immediately by the word if. Let's just do this in a small screen on its own. Right. If. Then we have an open bracket. Then the first thing we have is the logical test, which is basically the question in the form of a statement. So we have the logical test, then we have a comma. Then we have the value if true. Then we have a comma. Then we have the value if false. Then we close the brackets. And if I hit return, it will just display that on the screen because that's just a bit of text on the screen. So the logical test, I'm going to do a logical test here all on its own. A logical test is basically a question that results in the answer if true or false. So if I look at that cell there, C12, if I just say equals and then C12 greater than 500, that's me asking whether C12 is greater than, well, that's me saying C12 is greater than 500. If I say return, C12 is greater than 500. Yay, true. Now, if I'd said C12 greater than 5,000, that'd be false. And if C12 was actually greater than 5,000, then it'd be true. So simple as that. That is a logical test. A logical test can be really simple. It can be something is greater than something else, something is less than something, something equals something. It could be really complicated. It could be this column divided by these cells multiplied by today's date plus the number you first thought of equals something less than that column. Yeah, so you can have all kinds of complex calculations in there, but essentially it's making a statement which is either true or false. So that's that bit. The next bit then is true. That's really easy. It's what you want to see. You can make it say 500. It could be 4%. It could be 25th December. It can be bonus. The word bonus can come up. You can do whatever you like. The only thing that you need to remember with this, and the golden rule with working with formulas, is that if you're putting text in there, it needs to have speech marks around it. So by speech marks, I mean the ones on the number 2 key, and you put that around text so it knows it's text. Otherwise, it gets confused and thinks it's a named range, and then comes out an error message. The error message will be #name. So rather than seeing the word true, we can put in a value or a percentage or something else. Then we put a comma, and then we put the value of false. And false works in exactly the same way. We don't want to see the word false, so we can put 0 there, or you can put 10, or you can put 5%, or you can put you're fired, whatever you like. If it's a number, you just put the number in. If it's a piece of text, then you put it in speech marks. So that's how an if statement works. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if that's greater than 125, then put the word yes, otherwise put the word no. I'll do it in this column. Just because this is the spreadsheet I'm going to use in a minute to calculate stamp duty. So if I say equals if, open bracket, the logical test I'm looking at is that value greater than 125,000? So I'll say greater than 125, then comma, to move on to the next bit. As always, you can see in the helper the section that we're on by the fact that the bit I'm on is bold even. I've just done a logical test. I'm now on the value if true. And because I'm just going to put text in there, I'm going to put the word yes, but I need to put it in speech marks. And then when I press close the speech marks, press the comma again, I'll move on to the next bit, value false. I need to put that in speech marks and say the word no. And then when I close the brackets, provided that it's typed in the right way, then the helper will disappear. So now when I hit return, it'll either say yes or no, depending whether or not this house value attracts stamp duty. And hey presto, they all do, except that one. Don't worry about this error message right now. This is just because I'm not doing the correct calculation in here. So that's a basic if function. It asks a question in the form of a statement, and then it replies by showing you one value or another value. Now, what I want to do here is I want to calculate stamp duty on property prices. Now, to do that, we need more depth than just saying, is it greater than 125,000? Yes, or no, sort of thing. We need to actually work out which band it falls in. Now, this is one I created earlier, or from a previous training session, my advanced course, and I put the new system in to the right a bit. For this exercise, we're just going to do the old system because the old system was really easy. I'm not saying it was good, it was dreadful. It was designed by fools, which is why it was so easy, because I don't think they understood maths and stuff. But hey, that's governments for you. But the new system, we only ever do that on the advanced course when people are quite confident with the if function. And the reason why is because it looks a bit like this. Which for some people is a little bit complicated. But,
oh dear.
That was nicely presented. I put carriage returns in that one. Normally I don't do that. Yeah, normally it looks like that, which is even more complex.
Oh my God.
We're going to do a nice easy one though. So what we have here is a bunch of house prices, and these are thousands. So 130,000, 249,000. I probably need to update the figures. These will all be flats by today's standards, I expect. And that'll be, actually no, next year, all those prices will be going down. But, and there'll be a lot more empty houses as well, depending how things go. Happy days. But yeah, so the old system, it used to work on a principle of if it was greater, I can't remember how the system worked. I might just reopen this document. That'd be easier because I have the answer in there. But I think if it was greater than 125,000, it would be 1%. I don't know. I'm gonna reopen this document. So brace yourself for this. Don't save because I've deleted the bit that I need. Stuff for Wednesday, right? Which one of these was it? There we go. 500, 250, 125, right? 500, 250, 125. Let's make them all bold. And it was greater than 500. It was 4%, 3%, 1%. So that would be 4%, 3%, 1%. Okay, so bold as well. So that was the way the old system worked, was if it was greater than 500,000, then it was 4% on the whole value, which is why it was madness, because there's no graduation. If it was greater than 250,000, it'd be 3% on the whole value, and if it was greater than 125,000, it'd be 1% on the whole value. Using a regular if statement, it's really easy to look at this and say, yes, it's greater than 125, it's 1%. No, it isn't, it's 0%. But that's not going to get us anywhere. Now, an if statement doesn't have multiple levels to it. You can't say, well, what if it's between this and between that? It doesn't work that way. But it doesn't need to, because you just put an if statement inside an if statement. And so down here, I'll show you what it'd look like. You'd say equals if, open brackets, logical test, comma. Then you have your value if true. Just put caps lock on, that'd be a lot easier. Comma. And then if that value fails, rather than having the value if false, you just have another if statement, which is where we get the nested bit from. So you just put if, open brackets, another logical test. This time something that's easier to achieve. And then we have the value of true, and then comma. And then if that fails, you could have the value of false, or you can just have another if statement. And you can go on like this until you've asked all the questions, and then on the final level, you say value of true, and then if that fails, you say value of false. And then you close the brackets here that we've just opened, the ones before and the original ones. And when I hit return, it would then work beautifully. And so that's an example of a nested if. Now, there's loads of different ways of doing it. You can go off in different directions, but I've purposely chosen the false value to be where I nest them because it works. Well, it's a lot easier to demonstrate it that way. It works in a very logical manner. So here, what I'm going to say is I'm going to look at that value, and bearing in mind these thousands, I'm going to say, if that is greater than 500,000, then put 4% in this cell here. Failing that, if it's greater than 250,000, put 3% here. Failing that, if it's greater than 125,000, put 1% here. And if it isn't, just put 0. And so this is how it would work. Equals if, open bracket, the first logical test. I'm looking at C4 and saying C4 greater than 500, and then comma, the value of true. If it is greater than 500, then they're paying a whopping 4%. Then comma. The value of false is, well, if it isn't greater than 500, then let's ask another question. If, open bracket, again we're looking at C4, is it greater than 250? If it is, comma, 3%. If it isn't, the value of false is another question. If, open brackets, looking at C4 again, is it greater than 125,000? If it is, then 1%. Failing that, 0. I could put a percent on there, but I'm going to be a rebel and not bother, because it makes no difference. I've opened 3 sets of brackets, so I need to close 3 sets of brackets. Otherwise, all the numbers and formulas will fall out and end up on the bottom of the spreadsheet. It'll look like a right mess. But you can see how the brackets close because they've got their own colour to keep them in check. So if I close these ones, which are, I think it's purple, and then this one which is red, and then this one which is the default colour. Then when I hit return, well, first of all, the helper has disappeared, so I know that I've probably typed something that's acceptable. But when I hit return, I should get a percentage. Bingo. Now, this is only showing me a percentage because previously I formatted it as a percentage. If I hadn't have got this format set to percent or hit that button, it would show me 0 there. And then if I increase the decimal places, I'd see that it was 0.01. But don't let that bother you. Anyway, it's formatted as a percentage, so I can see that it's 1%. And then if I drag that down so that it looks at all the other values, like this one which is less than 125, it gives me the relevant percent for the old system of calculating stamp duty. And you can see why people never sold houses for 251,000, because the price difference was madness. This calculation here to show you what the actual cost of the stamp duty would have been on the old system is just that multiplied by that, so you get 1% of 130, then multiplied by 1,000 to give you 1% of 130,000. So that's a really easy calculation. So a bit like that. But if you were doing this sort of thing, you probably wouldn't care about that percentage. You just want to know the end result. So I just cheat and go over here. I'm just going to put it there. I would just type in that if statement really quickly, and then say times C4 times 1000. So what that if is doing is, rather than displaying the result of the if statement, it's just giving me the result of the if statement as part of the calculation. And I multiply that by C4 to give me 1% of C4. Then I'm multiplying that by 1000 to give me 1% of C4 if it was thousands. So when I hit return, depending on what the formatting of this cell ends up being, I should get, a value. So that's how it would normally be done in the real world. You'd just want the figure. You wouldn't care about the 2 steps. But there you can see that one is just looking at that and then giving me that answer. You don't need the different steps in there. And finally, if you want to get really big and clever, then you'd use the new system. And this is, like I said, it's a bit more complex, because the way the new system works is, well, how does the new system work? It works by saying the first 125,000 gets charged at 2%. No, after the 125,000, that gets charged at 2%, and then the next bit gets charged another percentage, and the next bit another percentage. So the difference being that if you go out and buy, I don't know, what, 2-bedroom house these days in the UK, I guess, for 833,000. On the old system, it would cost 33 grand in tax. On the new system, it only costs you 31. Unless you've already got a property, then it costs you 56. But I love doing this training in classrooms full of people in their 20s, because they always look at it going, huh? Huh? And it's like, yeah, you never get that back either. If that's just tax. But yeah, so that's the beautiful thing that is a nested if statement. Does anybody have any questions about any of it?
Yeah, so when you do that if statement, and you've got to put those brackets at the end, because obviously it's picking up the information in each one of those brackets.
Yeah.
What happens? It won't give you an answer, basically, if you don't.
Well, if you don't put them, it's most likely it will probably just put them in itself, I think, because it's quite clever like that. But that's really
right.
Oh no, it won't. Yeah, it suggests it. Accept this solution, yeah.
Oh.
But it's not that. The thing to think though is, let me make this a bit bigger, because it's probably quite small on the screens anyway. The thing to consider is that it's actually not that difficult to follow. So if I go here and do alt return, and here and do alt return, and then here return again. Right, if you look at this this formula, we said if, and then we opened a bracket. Now that bracket needs to be closed at some point, but it's not going to be closed right until the very end, because it's an if function, and inside the if function we've got 3 questions. The first is a logical test, then we've got the value of true, then we've got the value of false. But that value of false happens to be another if function, so that opens a bracket, which has to be closed. But it won't be closed until just before the other if function. And that, again, has got the same 3 parts. And again, the third part is another if function. So when you write it down, it's actually not that difficult to follow. I mean, on the screen, it's not ideal. But if you were doing a really complex, lengthy formula, and you kind of knew what you wanted to achieve, but you couldn't quite get it right in your head, the easiest way is just to write it down. Because when you write it down, you can look at it and you think like, yeah, that needs to be there. And if you write it in the order in which it's asking the questions, then it does make perfect sense in theory.
Yeah, because the brackets are kind of going back to front, aren't they? You're not starting from the front, you're going back.
Well, because what's happening is it's just that if statement. What we're doing is one if statement effectively there. So it's opening that bracket and it's closing it there. So that's the if statement. But inside that, there's another if statement, which is opening and closing. And it's got to close before the first one can close. And inside that, that's got to close. It's a little bit like a Russian doll. And the brackets are, one of the brackets is the bottom of the Russian doll and the other one's the top. And so you open the first one, and inside you've got another one, and then another one. And never mind. They still have Russian dolls. People care about it. Anyway,
Bit one of my thick questions, but I just wanted to know why,
no,
why it's like that.
well, a lot of people will look at it and go, I don't understand why I need those brackets, but that's why. It's because it might be that they might have some system where they say, for example, working on the theme of the old stamp duty, they might have said, well, if you buy a house for £500,000, then you pay 4%, but also you have to pay an extra £500 fee on it. And so then it might be that we stick an extra £500 in one of those brackets. It could be that sort of thing. That wouldn't actually make any sense in this scenario, but it might be that sometimes you want to do a bit of a calculation before you close the brackets. It's one of those things that makes more sense when you're actually applying it to your own situation.
Yeah.
But that's nested ifs. Yeah. So, like I say, the new system is a bit more detailed because you've got to work between bands, but we're not going to cover that today because that's far too much to do on a Wednesday morning. So, does anybody have any questions about anything? No. Okay, right, good. Well, as always, if you do think of anything, you're welcome to email me or ask me tomorrow, hopefully, if you return. If you've got any requests, if there's anything you particularly want to see, again, just let me know. Even if it's the cybersecurity thing, we can run through that again another day. And tomorrow I'm planning to cover basic Microsoft Access, just